Okay, so just want to start off the fireside chat. Just tell me a bit more about how you got involved in Lucey Fund and what brought you to investment.
Yeah, by accident really, actually. So we've done 118 investments so far, and I'm sure we can chat about some of the kind of stuff we get involved in. By accident, actually, a friend of mine runs Goshka. It's like the Duke of Edinburgh Award in Ireland, and he was running it, and he asked me. He said, "I need to get a website built." And we didn't really build websites or whatever, and we had our own software business at the time, and we're quite active in the startup community. And I sent him off to some people, and he came back with a quote for about 90 grand, and I'm like, what are you building? Like, that's not a website, you know? And he said, I want to automate the Duke of Edinburgh Award. He's like, all these kids get the booklets, they fill out the books. He's like, the teachers have to fill out 2 pages on each kid. Sometimes it's 200 kids in a school. He's like, it's hugely. He says, we've all this paperwork going forward and back. He's like, I just want the kids to do it on an app or do it in computers in class and do all of that. And he said, it's in 150 countries. And he said, the Brits have it, but it's not great. He said, the Aussies have computers, but they're not great. I think we could do it better. So we looked at it and said, well, actually, I've sent you to a web development house. This is more of a back-end system integration system. And I said, I looked at it and I was like, with the apps and everything, I said, it's actually going to cost about 150 grand. And but I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll donate it to you on a couple of conditions, because we were waiting on a big deal we were working on in our startup at the time. And I had a bit of spare capacity. I said, I'll do it for you on 2 conditions. I said, one, I'm going to insist on charging you something. So I said, I'm going to charge you a quarter of the bill. And I said, the reason for that is I'm going to go and spend 150 grand worth of our time doing stuff for you. And if you don't use it, I'll go nuts. So I said, if you part with the charity's money for some of it, you're going to have a requirement. And I said, the problem is, without being ageist or whatever, you don't seem very computer literate. This is a huge, more than the technology, this is a big change management process in your business. And I said, it's going to really upset your company, and you're probably going to have to hire some different staff to manage this. So I was like, there's going to be trouble in your business when this is built. And I said, I just don't want you to give up on it, so you have to pay it. And he's like, look, that's fantastic. He's like, that would make you our largest donor this year. And if you're ever going to donate to the President's charity, it's great. I met like the Duke of Edinburgh afterwards, met the Queen and everything, you know. And I get invited to all these lovely balls after it, right? No, everyone is suddenly, the President is happy with you, dinner in the President's house, that kind of stuff is great, right? But sure, and he said, that's grand. And he said, what's the other conditions you have? And I said, the other condition is, I said, whenever people go out and buy technology and they've never bought it before, overnight everyone thinks they're Steve Jobs or Don Draper, right? And I said, we're donating our time here to you, and the last thing we want to do is have to sit politely and smile at you when we know you're just talking nonsense, all right? So I said, what we'll do is we'll come in, we'll look at your business, and we'll tell you what to do, and we'll go do it for you. And we did, and sure enough, we built them their technology, and at the end of it, it was a real problem for them. They did have to restaff, and they changed a lot of their staff, which is quite difficult, because, you know, like, you suddenly had all these people hired who were not appropriate staff and stuff. But they got it working, but when we handed it over to them, we said, now, we have a little treat for you. And they're like, what's that? We said, well, we think about these things as businesses. And I said, what we actually did is you have 150 potential customers of this. So what we've done is we built it so you can now sell it to the rest of them, and you can start making your money back by charging them annually to run your software, and you're now the tech hub of the whole thing. So they went off to do that, and we'd kind of finished our time. They took advantage of it, and I believe they're off doing that. And when we finished it, we were looking at it, and we went, what's different about them than most of the startups that we meet? Because we're big into the startup community, we're big into these kind of communities. I was saying to you earlier, one of our interns actually started Startup Grind in Dublin when you probably only had about 10 chapters globally, you know. And so we're very involved, and we're like, and the big thing I found in the startup community, and this is where we're very different to VCs and stuff like that, is we have this, we call it the Mythical Cto. So we go around the world, we do all of these talks, and what you get is all this startup community whereby people are going, oh, I'm just looking for my CTO. and I'm going to take my business and I'm going to go do it, all right? And what's interesting is we're in the middle of the second great industrial revolution, and people don't get that these CTOs don't exist, right? There might be some of them, right? But might be some of them, but I put it to this way, there's probably not enough good CTOs in Glasgow to cover the startups in the room, all right? And then on top of that, some of these guys, like yourself, and be paid very well to go work for companies like Skyscanner or FanDuel and stuff like that. So you've got to have a very compelling offer, the reason why you're going to pay this person crap when their job skill set is so hard to get a hold of. And then even then, if you can afford to, and I remember I could afford to hire someone when I started my company, and the first thing the guy did is he sat me down and explained everything he couldn't do. And I am like, oh, Jesus, this is going to cost a fortune. Like, I'm already paying him 6 figures and he's telling me everything he can't do. And it's funny because we look at it now when we deal with startups and we see we have about 13 technology skill sets in our business. So, most people are only good at 1 or 2 of them, right? Maybe 3 if they're super clever, right? But you've got like architecture, infrastructure, back-end development, front-end development, UI, UX, app development, project management, testing. Like there's a whole pile of skills and people think I'm going to hire this one person, they're going to do all of that. And when we looked at it, we went, the maths don't support that. So what we decided we would do is we said, why don't we see what happens if we announce that we're going to do that? And it was funny because you have to come up, when you launch a fund, you must say how much money is in your fund, all right? But we're like, we've no idea whether anyone wants to do this or not. So we had to come up with a number for how much the fund was going to be worth. And we couldn't, we were like, are we going to say £1 million we're putting aside for this? What are we going to do? And we're like, Jesus, like, are we going to do £1 million for this? Like, or what are we going to do? Because if you say the number and you don't spend it, you're a chancer, right? So we're like, what are we going to come up with? So we did the Heinz thing. Do you know the Heinz thing? Do you ever know Heinz 57? The next time you look at your bottle of ketchup, there's a number 57, 57 varieties on it. Do you know the story behind this? It's quite interesting, right? He needed to just put a number on the bottle. And he was like, what's the best number to put on the bottle? So he's like, well, actually, the best number to put on the bottle, 1, 2, and 3 are small numbers. 9 and 8 are not quite there. 4 and 5 and 6 are a bit average. So 7's the most powerful number. So he's like, right, I'm going to put 7 in the number. And then he's like, well, I'm not going to do 77 because it seems strange. So he picked 57 varieties. So next time you look at a bottle of Heinz. So we were like, what'll we go with? So we're like, let's flip that and say we're going to do 750 grand's worth of this. And that was how we announced our fund. Yeah, and we had 200 applications in the first 7 to 10 days. And we were like, okay, there's a lot of people want to do this. To date, we've probably deployed, I'd say we're up on 13, 14 million at least, if not more, and it's a kind of a rolling thing that we do. And it's funny because a lot of people, there's people like what we do and people who hate what we do. There's people who say you're an investor and other people who say you're not an investor. And our thing is, we don't really care about that. You're kind of in this tech crunch generation, as we call it, which is slowly coming to the end, whereby the most revered companies are the ones who've raised the most capital, not the ones who've actually got a business up and running and have sold a business and done everything. And like when I started out selling software, it was for accountants. And the way you financed a product in the accountants industry was very simple. You had your old desktop software, you had your big event, you had 10 modules down the left-hand side, and for 2 days beforehand, the CTO slapped you in the face saying, how many modules work, how many modules work? And we all knew only the first 3 modules worked. And if anyone asks a question about the other ones, you have some way of distracting them back onto the first 3, because until you got the deposits, you couldn't afford to pay for the rest of the software. And there was no Series A, no seed rounds, none of that. And we look at it and we go, we're really just interested in starting companies. So that's kind of what we do. And there's a very long answer to your first question. I told you we wouldn't have to answer many questions. But so that's kind of our view of the world. And our view of the world is there's so much waste in the world. So why not try things quickly,
So my next question was about what your sale is to investors, to startups.
Yeah.
You kind of answered that with the Mythical Cto.
Yeah.
Do you co-invest with anyone? Do you
we're actually right at the idea stage of a business. So a lot of the time we're a facilitator to get investors into a company, all right? Because you have a lot of people, I'm sure as people in the room have probably been told, it's all about your team, it's all about your team. You can't invest in you because you don't have a team. And then you have other people who go, I can't invest in you until I see your customers and your product. And what's interesting is there's a whole VC industry out there to help 22-year-old kids in hoodies have some beer and pizza, sit in a room and hack something together. But actually what's interesting, as young and youthful as you all may look, that's not actually the age profile of the startup community. Most of the people are older than that. And in fact, we have very few investments under the age of 30. A lot of the people that we've invested in, as far as we know, we don't ask them their age. They look older anyway, right? Because there's a whole industry behind that. But actually, to give you some stats, only 4% of the founders we've invested in can program. And less than 10% of them have ever ran a technology project before. So a lot of the time what we're doing is we're a facilitator to get people like an MVP out so that they can get their first couple of customers, show there's market traction, and then we help them kind of get investors on board who are going to come in, and then they get rid of us as their technology or their marketing team and replace us with their own team. So the idea being they kind of run through with us. So instead of like even the normal accelerator model where someone stands at the top of the room and tells you what to do, we're your employees and you will hopefully replace us. Do you know what I mean? But what we never realized when we were doing it is how little the people in the startup community actually knew about running companies. So what we've found we're doing more and more is actually teaching founders how to run a business, because like I'm sure there's a load of people in the room here have had very stressful, annoying technology purchases. I bought something from India, it was a pile of crap or whatever, right? And funnily enough, the poor Indians get dogs abused, and that's because they're the cheapest. A lot of the time people go with the cheapest model, but actually if you knew how to buy technology, you could buy it from them. But most people don't know how to buy the tech, and they don't understand that you need a good tech spec to do it. You need to do, you know what I mean? So there's a skill set that you've got, and it was like us, because I'd been selling software for years. We had that skill set, but we didn't realize how little other people might have had of it. You know, so so we've struggled with that. Like 58% of the companies we've invested in have only one founder. So we might only, like a lot of the time, the business might be the person with the idea and us, until we get them a product and some customers, and then they begin to replace us and kind of move on, you know.
That's kind of the opposite model from what a lot of investors invest in. And my next question was about kind of team. I wanted to kind of delve into how a team's formed and what you look for in a founder. What kind of value do you put on to the founders as opposed to the product market fit?
It's all about the founder.
Right.
It's all about the founder, and you know, a lot of the time your idea is going to change. Between when we say, yeah, we'll do that with you, and you get a product, we've probably helped you change your product a lot of the time. Most people's market pitch is wrong. The way in which people go after a market, I can give you kind of some examples in a while of how people go and pitch stuff, is wrong, you know. And we spend a lot of time arguing with founders trying to explain this. So I'll give you an example. We bought a company recently called Twiznite. And Twiznite is, we're just redeveloping it at the moment because the founder who had it was determined to do it one way. And it's funny, he loves us now, but he sold us, because he sold us the business. We bought it and said, we could do that better than you if you don't mind. So we bought it off him, right? Lovely fella, right? But Twiznite is, it's a Twiz. A Twiz is a quiz on Twitter. It's such a simple idea, right? He was an accountant and he thought of this, and we're like, what a brilliant idea. He goes, I'll run a quiz, 100 people, like imagine we run a Twiz here, all right? And there's a prize. And everyone's on Twitter, and the whole thing is, we're going to run a Twiz, but we're putting the sponsors hashtag on every time you answer, all right? So suddenly there's 50 of us answering 10 questions. You've now been tweeted about 500 times, and suddenly you're trending in Scotland as the most talked about person in Scotland. What a simple idea, all right? When he went to build that technology, he pestered us, and we argued it out because he wanted everything to go through twiznite.com. So you would go in there, and it looked like NASA. There was up-to-date league tables after every question. There's this, there's that, there's everything, there's the whole lot. and Man United are going to run a quiz and they're going to do it here and everyone's going to come here. And he actually wanted apps, so you'd install the Twiz Night app, and we're like, no. We were like, no, run it on Twitter, right? Because it's Twitter is what you're doing really, right? And he wanted us to build it, and we're working with him. And one of our problems is when we go into a company, we will advise, but we're the employees. So if the founder insists, no, we're doing it this way, we're contractually obliged to follow them. So we do get lippy back to them and say, no, are you mad, you know? And this guy was determined, but he ended up running out of money because what he didn't realize is brands are interested in their brand. And a lot of startups think that their brand is important and your brand is not important, right? And to the extent we have a logo that we like to show people, like Lucey, we'd like I Love Lucy, you know, the TV program, right? So we did this we had a red ball as our logo and we got it into a beating heart. This guy, we paid him $3,000 to do this, right? He had won an Oscar for animation, right? And the only use we've ever found for the logo was to show how stupid a company can be thinking their brand is important, right? And that was us being stupid, spending $3,000 on a fucking bouncing logo, right? But it's interesting, but that is most startups. Most startups are interested. But actually, if you think about it, when Man United go to run a Twiz to their million fans, they don't want to install a Twiz Night app. They want that within Twitter and within Man United's brand experience. Do you know what I mean? And they're the kind of mistakes that we see in businesses a lot. And we see people where they don't maybe charge enough. I was chatting to the guys earlier about pricing. We're chatting about pricing. We have a strict rule on pricing. And the rule is think of a price you're embarrassed to ask for and double that. And that's how much your product should sell for. All right? Because nearly every startup we meet goes in as I'm the cheap option in the market. And in fact, it's very rare that works. And if you're going to do that, you need an inordinate amount of capital to do that. It's actually way easier to go in at a higher level. So I'll give you an example of that. We once bought a design agency in London. And after 2 or 3 weeks, we were like, oh, Jesus, we hadn't thought about this. All right? There's 4,000 web development agencies in London. And we wanted some London design because we were very much back end when we started. And of the 4,000 web development agencies in London, only 10% make a profit. The vast majority, and the problem is there's always someone cheaper, always someone newer, always someone cooler, always someone more expensive, always someone everything. And what happens is people worry about losing the deal in front of them, so they discount it. And because you've discounted it, you've got to go do all that work, but now you don't have as much time to go find the next project. And it's having the confidence to go, I'm going to actually charge you twice as much for that. I'm going to have a third less customers, but I'm going to have 50% more time to go find another customer to match you. And by the way, I'll have been paid well for it. So at the end of it, I'll have a happy customer as well. And people don't think that way, you know. So we spend, you've no idea how much time we spend on trying to convince people to be paid more money. It's a bizarre thing.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with a startup founder not that long ago who was struggling to get the product to market because they didn't think they were ready. And it comes back to something you said before. I had a terrible time trying to convince them that no one will care about their launch and that their product is only as good as the customers that they actually get and the money they get.
It's an interesting point, right? Because it's so much... people who come into startups, and a lot of them are software startups, right? If you come into software, it's so much easier to sell this can than it is to sell a piece of software. Because software never finishes. So there's always another bit you can add onto it and another bit. And I don't know if any of you watch Father Ted, but there's the scene when... this is startups now, right? Did you ever see the scene when they dented the car? Did you ever see that? And they take out the hammer to fix the car? Google it if you haven't, right? That is startup product development, right? Where, I'll just touch it one more time, and suddenly they destroyed the car. And I would know that because we've done it ourselves, where you've spent way too much money on it, right? And you're better off going out with something cheap and nasty, because the fact of the matter is the vast majority of your customers only use a tiny amount of your features anyway. And it takes experience to know not to build stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, completely. I think I've reached this pinnacle of my startup brain career now. I've had an Irishman on that quoted Father Ted during the startup brain.
We go with all the visionaries. That's all we're interested in. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit more about, I want to delve deep into the founders, the team, the initial team that you invest in. Can you give me kind of a list of things that you would look for?
4 things we look for.
4 things? You go.
Yeah, we make most, we get 5,000 applications a year, so we get through these quite quickly. Number 1, do you understand the industry that you're working in? All right? We see a load of people starting products for industries they've never worked in. Our view is that's a big assumption on your behalf. So if you want to do some transport piece of software, you have to realize you're declaring yourself smarter than everyone back as far as Marco Polo. All right? So what is it? If you want to start in an industry you haven't worked in, you'd want to give us a lot of analytics and a lot of proof that says you know why they're all wrong. Now that does happen quite regularly, because a lot of time people will go, I work in this industry, but I see the way they service me, and what the hell are they doing? But to back that up, you've got to know why all those people are stupid and didn't behave the blaringly obvious way you thought they should behave. So that's the first one. The second one is, can they sell? So we're not looking for the Jerry Maguire, I'm the most charismatic person in the room stuff, because that's not what most selling is. What we're interested in is people who have the ability to go, this is what I have, this is how I explain it, and this is how it's going to hit the world. And like, my favorite salesman on the planet is probably Bill Gates, who's a complete techie, and back in the day he was considered the world's biggest nerd. And yet the thing is, he completely understood his industry and how it would work, and had a very good strategy for how he was going to go sell his business. And it ties into the third thing we look for, which is, do you understand the maths behind your industry? So a lot of people, as I said, one, people discount their stuff too much, but the other one is people don't understand things like the timeline of sales. So we have a lot of guys, like B2B software is a great business for Irish and Scottish businesses, because it's not as easy to raise big, huge Series A rounds like you would in Silicon Valley. Even though your 2 biggest companies are consumer products that you've done, FanDuel and Skyscanner, right? Just proves you can do that here as well if you want. But a lot of the real solid Scottish businesses are probably B2B products. And I'm not an expert in hardware, I'm more software, but the stuff we'd know. But what you find a lot of the time is people underestimate how long it takes to sell something. And they also underestimate the fact that that multinational who's now bought it might not get around to using your product for 3 or 4 months, and you're going, but I need you to use it because I need the analytics to prove to an investor that this works, and blah, 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 blah. So you need to understand the maths and how long it takes and how long you're going to need, and you need to be able to, as we like to call it, not lying, telling the truth in advance is a very important thing, you know. So you've got a lot of, and then number 4 is we have a no arseholes policy. You'd be amazed, there's a lot of startup founders are very hard to take, and and we're their employees. So our view is, you know, we'll see what they're like, you know. And you know, moo.com, he had that. It was a great line. He had a line which was, it's better to have a hole in your team than an asshole in your team, and we kind of agree with that. And it's funny, but we've actually, as we've gotten more mature as a business doing this, to begin with, we were really worried about what people thought about us. Did the startup founder have a good experience? Are they happy with us or whatever? These days, we don't care, right? We don't care. And there's people who will say, that is the worst way to start a business imaginable. And we go, that's fine. We're not for everybody. It's not what we do. But we've worked with founders where we've gone to them after a month or two going, this won't work like. Because you don't listen, or you're like, we've had people like who are so busy going to startup events that they never run their company.
Startup events are good.
Well, no, actually, here's my thing on startup events. I was saying to you earlier, right? Our rule on the startup community with all of our startups is you get 6 months in the startup community. And then you must leave the startup community and join the business community for whatever industry it is that you're in. The people who shouldn't leave the startup community are people like ourselves, all right, who are engaging with startups. And you should come back to the startup community because it's a very, you know, it's a inspiring, interesting thing to do. And I'm sure there's people in the room here where it's a lifestyle option, where they enjoy the innovation, they enjoy the chat about it, but they're going back to go to work in whatever company they're working in, and they like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a whole coffee culture thing of, I'm super busy. And I know we chatted about it earlier. We have a real problem in Ireland with this, where there's so much grant money early on in the startups. Like the Enterprise Ireland claimed to be the third largest VC in the world. They're not a venture capitalist. They're a grant agency, all right, who do investments, all right, as a way to keep the European Union happy. And they can take a year of your life up, to go do it. Like, we had an intervention there recently with one of our startup founders because he went on this program. It was a 6-month government program where he's getting 15 grand. But we only realized as he was going into it, he's 2 days a week. And if he doesn't do his 2 days a week, he doesn't get his 15 grand over 6 months. I'm like, what the fuck? You'd have earned twice that money, in the meantime, and go to a course at nighttime or do something, or ask us if you're not sure. Do you know what I mean? So we just think all of that stuff needs to be struck out. It's all nonsense, and sell something, sell something.
Coming back to kind of what you're looking for in a founder, what don't you look for in a founder? I know you don't look for, you've got no asshole policy. What's next?
Well, the stuff that, we're only interested in businesses that we can have a positive impact on. So if you pitch us a business and we don't have a clue what you're on about, we're probably not of much use, So, we don't do hardware because we don't know hardware. We recommend, if you have a hardware business, a lot of time we recommend Highway 1 by PCH, another Irish crowd. Have you heard of these guys? They have an amazing hardware acceleration program. They'd be one of the big suppliers to Apple, but they have offices in China, Ireland, and San Francisco, and they'll get you your San Francisco money and your build it in China, and they do all that. So we're all going, look, go do that stuff. What we've started to do a bit more of in some cases is sometimes people come to us and they have their tech done. So what we might do is work with them as a non-exec or something like that, or guide them through it. It's very hard to outsource your sales, and we don't recommend people outsource the sales in their business. It's a real kind of you go do it, because selling early stage in businesses is so much about that founder and the founding team. They're buying into you. We're very happy to go in as your techie and sit in the room with the big company you want to close, and they'll ask questions, and the techie will go, these people know what they're on about. Do you know what I mean? We'll do all that, but really the founders need to lead that stuff. So if people are shying away from that, we don't do a lot of it. Consumer-focused stuff, the Skyscanner stuff of the world, we're really only interested if you really understand how to scale that. You've got to be brilliant at digital marketing and things like that. Think of all the skills that Skyscanner have to be good at in order to do a business like that. The odds are a single founder on their own can only do a bit of it. And actually, within the next 12 months, you've got to go for an amazing team and how you're going to raise your capital and what you're going to do. And we're kind of looking for that stuff. So, we don't actually mind if we don't understand the industry, if you know what I mean. That should be your job. Yeah.
So, in terms of, you spoke a bit earlier about you being the startup's employees.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work in terms of when you invest, if you take a board seat, or if there's someone actively the investor within Lucey Fund, or
we don't take board seats that often.
Right.
We take the right if we have more than a certain percentage, like more than 5%. We might take the right to have a seat in the board, but I think we've only taken it up maybe 3 times or something like that. The reason we don't is that's another resource, and it's a big resource, and plus you're normally early enough you don't need us, and a lot of the board stuff and things like that would kind of come along later, and it's probably best to keep those seats for the new investors that you're bringing in and stuff, where we've an open door policy. People can come in and ask us whatever it is they want to do and do all of that. But but normally we don't. What's funny, actually, we call it the happiness flow with our startups, right? So when they start with us, they're like, oh, thanks very much. I really appreciate you doing this with me. This is great. And then you have a kind of couple of weeks or a month where we're quizzing them and they're like, geez, this is fascinating. I never thought about this. This is great. And then the tipping point starts to happen where they go, why are they now asking me more questions? This is terrible, right? Because we're going into a level of detail that they don't think, I just build it. And we're like, no, you can't just build it, whatever. So we build it. And they release their product and they've got it and they hire their own team. And it's funny, we're always the least popular once someone has hired their own team, because for the first couple of months they're like, this is so much better than having the Lucey lads fucking pestering me. I can just ask that guy, would you go do that? And he figures it out and he does it. And then about 6 to 12 months later, after they've now been running their own business, they go, oh, Jesus Christ, I just never realized, I never realized that if I just let them do what they want, they're going to waste a load of this or they'll do that. So we find a year after, they love us. And they're like, geez, I never realized what you were doing for us and stuff. So it's a kind of a funny flow or curve that we have with them,
So in terms of, can you tell me more about the last investment you made, the last public investment, and why you decided to say yes to that person?
Jesus, they come in ticking quite fast now. What was our very last one? Our very last one was a company called Super Tech Box that we did last week, who they do software for blood banks. And a very technical piece of software that they do for blood banks. It's kind of an interesting one. Very B2B, very niche. Person knows what they're doing, and actually they've already got some tech in place, but don't have all of it. That was kind of this week or last week. We've also done a one called Career Vim as well. We're just in the middle of doing this week, I think. And Career Vim is it's for tracking employees within big companies and showing them what their career paths could be within those industries and stuff like that. But what's really interesting about that guy is he had a PowerPoint, basic demo. He's gone out, sold himself a bunch of customers who were paying him really well, and now he's like, I need this built quickly. And I'm like, I like you. And it's funny, he's even sitting there and he's up to 6 figures of turnover, but hasn't incorporated it even yet, right? And he's going, I don't know, is this going to be big enough for me? Is this worth doing? And I'm like, what a great attitude. You have other people who'd be in the newspaper for 6 months talking about their startup because they got a customer or two. And this person has literally got his customers, got his cash, got everything, and is going, I really need more skill sets in my business so that these customers get a good experience. And that's brilliant.
I need a product.
Yeah.
I need a product now. I'm making all this money.
Yeah. I better build that product as soon as they're all paying me for it. So we get kind of different ones. Like some of the companies, I give you examples of different stuff we've done with people. Medics Note is a good one. Medics Note is WhatsApp for hospitals. So I explain this one a lot. A guy who was a radiographer, and nurse was coming in, taking a picture of the X-ray and WhatsApping it to the doctor. And he's like, that's illegal. And the nurse's response is, the whole hospital is doing it. So we literally built WhatsApp for hospital, and now they're now communicating within hospitals. So he's like signed a couple of big NHS hospitals. He's done the HSE, but like there was probably the guts of £500,000 of development plus in order to get that product out to market. And he probably needs another £1 million to make it even super better. But he's begun to put chatbots into it. So now the nurses and the doctors can ask questions of these databases and get the answers they want back super quick from bots and stuff like that. So very interesting kind of one. But this is a guy, like he's an interesting case study. He was actually telling me, I was chatting to him yesterday, and I thought this is brilliant. He was like, he had 7 kids, and I was like, under the age of 11, I was like, that's fucking incredible, and I was chatting to him recently, and he says, I won't lie to you, he says, a bit embarrassed, didn't want to tell some of the investors we had an 8th about a year and a half ago. He says, I wouldn't admit to it. And we're like, where the hell are you fitting all this in? And but yeah, he's just an example of, he's a guy who understands the industry, really struggled with the tech, did a lot of that. So that's a real simple kind of model one. We've on the other side where we do some of the advisory stuff, a good example is a crowd called Buscabox. And Buscabox is, if any of you, he came to us, right? It was interesting. He comes to us and he says, I have this product. And I was like, yeah, not a bad product. That's good, whatever. I'm looking for investment in this. I was like, so tell me about you. He's like, oh, we're a 7-year-old business. And I was like, what? And he says, yeah, we're a 7-year-old business. We have this product. It's a profitable little business. And he says, and we have a second product. We've built it, but we haven't really started selling it yet. But I'm really focused on product number 3. And I'm going, no one's investing in you. And he's like, why? I says, like, why don't you just sell more product number 1 and number 2 and put the profits into product number 3? No, I don't want to miss the market. I don't want to do it. I was like, no one's going to invest in you because you're clearly not selling this stuff. And he's like, well, we're not very good at selling. And we were looking at him and we're going, well, then do you understand that this is an awful investor pitch and you're not going to do anywhere, right? And we were saying, what you're better off doing is selling, but you shouldn't outsource your sales. Because that was his first thing. He's like, well, will you sell it? And I'm like, no, that doesn't work. You can't do that kind of stuff. So we said, tell you what we do. We go on your board and we'll work with you in that regard. I need no board or anything. I said, there's only one condition. We want you to hire somebody else on the board on the same terms as us, who I do not know, but they must be kind of senior or whatever. And he's like, why is that? And I said, because I guarantee I'm going to disagree with you and I'd like a referee. And so he did, and he brought in a marketing director of a big telcos company or whatever. And the first 3 board meetings, he was going nuts by the end of this. The 2 of us, who I'd never met the guy before, he's like, product number 2. And he kept going, what about product number 3? And we're like, sell product number 2. It's built, it's ready or whatever. And what product number 2 is have any of you been to a Bookies recently? All right? No, everyone denies it. All right? But you go into a Bookies now, and it's like NASA inside there. It's all screens. The dirty smoke and the little guy with the pen is kind of gone. All right? But what's interesting is the last undigitized bit of a Bookies is the newspaper down the back. They put all the newspaper with the runners and riders of the races. And product number 2 this guy had was the newspapers digitized, so that actually the odds are on the newspaper, all right? And they're live up to minute odds. But what's even more interesting is whereas the Racing Post would have been supplying the newspaper, this guy was able to do it, but Paddy Powers now could put an ad next to the next race, and they can just change the ad centrally across all their shops, and people can go in and go do it. And what was interesting is within 12 months of us starting on his board, he'd offer 15 million for product number 2. And what was even more interesting is he said no to it. All right? And and it's interesting. And he's done some big deals now. And I won't say much, but your experience going to the races, you will notice in the next 12 to 18 months will change a lot based on the technology that this guy has. And he still hasn't started product number 3. You know, and so they're the kind of things that we do, and it's, as I said, it's a kind of a different beast or model, you know.
Yeah. So we have a lot of people in the room who have started their own startup. We've got a lot of people in the room who have yet to start, and we've got a lot who have kind of been around the industry for a while. What advice would you give to people who are just starting out, who are just
start your business at 6 o'clock? That's our rule. We started our business at 6 p.m. and we worked until 1 a.m. and we did that for 6 months where we didn't quit our jobs, and we started our business and we snuck out during those 6 months to do the couple of meetings you had to do during the day with the government body or doing this or that or whatever, because that's better than any investor money. It's your own cash, it's your own stuff, and you can invest it in and get your own tax back and do stuff like that, and you've control over so much more. So we always say to people, delay quitting your job as long as you absolutely can, and realize that if you think about your day's work today, what percentage of your day's work today had to take place between 9 and 5? And that means you could probably get away with doing your existing job, squeezing an hour or 2 of key work in during that day, and doing the other 3/4 of your day's work at night time. And that's it. So we always say we started our business at 6 p.m. And we actually started our business around September, I think, but we didn't go full-time until March of the following year. And if you look at when we incorporated, it was March of the following year. But the day we incorporated, we took our government grant and we took everything else because we had pre-prepped everything before we started. And for us, that was the equivalent of a 6-figure investment.
So
for anyone who quit their job last week, sorry about that.
we're kind of getting to the end of the fireside chat. I'd like to kind of finish off with a few questions, just quick fire that I ask everyone that comes along. So the first one is, tell me something that you believe that almost no one agrees with you on.
God, good question. We should all work less. Oh, good. There you go. We should work less. I'm addicted to my bloody phone. I think it's terrible. I'm literally addicted to it. I think there's a lot of stuff like that you got to change. And I think the startup community is incredibly immature and will be looked back on in 10 years' time as primarily nonsense. And I think what you'll find is these events are going to be way bigger then. And I don't mean in terms of size, I mean in terms of how many of them take place. But I think the quality of the learning is going to be so much better. So I hear a lot about community right now in different cities that I go into, and I do these kind of chats, and I go, actually, none of your communities are as good as Silicon Valley, where if the best thing about going to Silicon Valley is you can do a mixer here, throw out your idea, and the general populace will tell you what's wrong with it. Do you know what I mean? And that's what Glasgow needs, it's what Dublin needs, it's what all these cities need. And people don't like hearing it because it sounds like a critique of the people doing it, but we all have to start from somewhere, and I think we'll all get a bit better as we go along, but we're all quite new at it. And there's a lot of the businesses we've started that we could have helped them better than we helped them, you know. So.
I like to think of it as kind of ecosystem maturity.
Yeah.
Growing an ecosystem has to have those first few successes before that trickles down into the wider ecosystem, and then that trickles down and it becomes a kind of fountain effect. Yeah. So secondly, tell me about one failure you've had and how you overcame it.
Oh, good God, there's loads of them to choose from. I mean, we're in the business of failure. And this is the horrible bit that I think people need to understand. So when we were looking at it, we're going, right, we're doing this business and we're starting it. What's our strategy going to be for follow-on investment? And when we chatted to people originally, the thing was like, well, you can't have a VC fund because you're not going to invest in all of them and you're saying the other ones are rubbish. And it's funny, but it's only in the last year where we went, yeah, fuck it, I don't care. We're going to go do that, all right? Because life is harsh and it's super harsh, right? And if you look at 500 startups as an example, all right? 500 startups would tell you that 90% of the capital they get back comes from 4% of the companies. So you're talking about you're going to be really right 1 in every 24 times. Now that's depressing when you think about it, all right? And, you know, if you think about it, like in the 118 startups that we have, we've probably got 5 good ones, like crackers that are going to return a lot of capital to us. We might have 20% of them that will return us some capital. We might have another 20% that create a nice lifestyle business and 5 or 10 jobs and do everything else and the whole lot. But it may very well be that out of all of those companies, only one of them makes me a whack ton of money, all right? And at the end of the day, I'm in it to make money as much as I'm in it for it's a fascinating life and it's interesting. But isn't that horrible when you think of all the failures and all the people and everything? And we always say it, like, I say at this stage, I put my name above the door in my business. I got invested in startups. And it was the best thing I ever did and the literally worst thing I have ever done in my life, all right? My reputation, is like I was in a gossip business magazine again today in Ireland, right? I have people who hate my guts. Why do they hate my guts? Because I was the only person working with them in their startup, all right? And they all told their friends and family, and I've got this thing, and I've got everything else. And at some stage, we're going, that's not working. Or their business failed. And when it fails, how many people like to turn around and go, that was my fault? Most people don't, so we naturally get to blame a lot. And what we didn't realize is how bad some people are at running startups. Because we never thought about it because I was used to selling software, so I kind of assumed everyone knew what we knew, and we realized they didn't. And we funded our business wrong in order for that. You know what I mean? We did things wrong. We had a big argument with the taxman in Ireland because someone didn't pay their bill to us, but then they issued us shares. And we were like, what did you do? And they did this thing, and suddenly the taxman wanted to shut down our business. And we're there. And then what's worse is at the time I'd created a board, and on the board is the captain of the Irish rugby team. And suddenly now this is newsworthy that this company with the captain of the rugby team is here, and he's on every gossip paper, he's in the national papers, and I was such a media slut already. I've got like mobile phone direct from like the Sunday Times, and these guys are Jesus Christ. And my wife's looking at me going, just don't invest in anyone who's got kids in the school or whatever, or stuff like that. And
then you've got a guy building a football team.
Pardon?
Then you've got a guy building a football team.
And then you've got, there's that kind of stuff like, and you're like, oh my God, what have I done? So it's a brilliant idea, but an awful idea. And the funny thing is, and it's funny because like I've brought on investors, and one of them was like, why'd you do it? Like, why are you doing it? Like, you're never going to keep some of these guys happy. And what we've realized is actually the best thing to do is tell them in advance now. There's a good chance we're not going to like each other in 6 months' time. But the odds are, if you go to startups, I don't know how many of you have been in startups already, but statistically a lot of founders don't like each other after it. Isn't that true? Now, funnily enough, 2 years later, they all like each other again because it's a high, intense, pressurized thing. And unlike us versus the founder we're in, it's their life, it's their life savings, it's their vision, their dream. And if we mess up, and there's times we're not brilliant, and there's times when we are, but they don't realize that we're good at it, and it's a horrible, horrible experience. So our view is like, well, fuck it, tell everyone at this stage, and admit it's not easy. And we're actually going to launch a VC fund next year that just heavily invests in our best 3 or 4 companies every year. And our view is, sorry, you're not one of them, but the target is there for you. Try and make sure you get it the year after. Do you get what I mean? And it's not a nice message to give to people that you push through, So there you go. My biggest failing. Yeah.
So I'd like to open up to anyone who has any questions. Come on.
Have you invested in something that you thought this is complete waste of time, but it's so fun?
So fun. I'll tell you the one that I'm pushing hugely at the moment, and people are like, Ian, where the hell are you going with this, right? I'm determined to start a custom electric car high-end sports company, all right? So I'll tell you why, right? So this is my story's a long. I apologize. You'll be here all night. Should have started earlier. And this guy came into me and he pitched a 30 grand electric car, all right? And I chuckled at him because I never laugh at a startup, but I laughed at him and I felt bad afterwards, which got me into this, right? And I was like, have you heard of Elon Musk? Because I was like, he's Iron Man and he's got about 10 billion more than you to do this, right? And by the way, the last thing we built in Ireland was the bloody DeLorean. And he shoots back, 3/4 of the DeLorean are still on the road. I'm like, that's only because they were in fucking Back to the Future, right? And they were made out of aluminium. They were one of the few aluminium cars, right? But what was interesting, right? This is my big thing in it, right? So Christmas before last, I decided I'm going to do something nice for my wife. I said, I want to do something different, something interesting. I'm going to try something new. So there's a startup in Ireland, and they had won like the Web Summit competition called Love and Robots, and they do 3D printing of earrings. So I go, that's what I'm going to do. And I told a couple of people, I'm going to get unique 3D printed earrings for my wife, and I'm going to put the kids' faces on them. All right? So I go into this crowd, and they look at me, and they go, we don't do that. I was like, I thought you do 3D printing. Like 3D printing means you can do it. No, we just print the same thing all the time. I was like, all right. So now I'm going, Jesus Christ, I'm after telling people I'm doing this. So I was going to look bad, I was really doing, and I had really pushed up the, the mothers in the school thing, like, oh, I see what I'm getting for Christmas. So I was like, crap. So I go down to the local university, which happened to be 3D specialists, right, in Ireland, and I go, this is what I'm looking for. And your man goes, do you know you're the first person in the world to do this? And I was like, why is that? And he says, because we have a database of all the ideas that come in. He says, the only machine that could print a face is this thing here. It's worth like 2-3 million quid. And we share it globally, all the ideas people come in with. You're the first person to ever look to do this. And I said, well, can we do it? We can. And you were doing it in pure silver. So it had to be hollow because it's not sterling silver like you normally get it with it. She'd have ended up with like the African ears, the big ears. And so long story short, right? I had to get the designs done in Australia. I had to get it polished in another part of the world. I had to do all this. It cost a fortune, right? But just as I'm about to hit print, he goes, do you want a spare set? Because he's like, it's only another €2 for another set of them, right? And I was like, yeah, get me a spare set. So we get the set. I get this book made of the holiday with all the pictures, the kids' pictures, and one of the picture was from the holiday. I give it to my wife. She's like, oh, that's kind of interesting or whatever. Like, she's not great for receiving gifts. And then she looks and she's like, what's that? I said, I got a spare set for your mom. She says, I thought you said they were unique. I was like, oh. Right? So I was like, I'm going to kill you right now, right? And I was there. It was Christmas morning now. It was nearly a butchery, right? But I'm looking at this guy with his 30 grand car. And I go, you're mad. But I go, do you know where you're right, though? All right? Is because he's going, it's a normal chassis. All right? It's EU approved chassis. All right? We're putting this thing on it. And I said, what's actually interesting about your idea is that car is your dream car. All right? So I was like, why can't I have my dream car? And what we're looking at doing, and it's funny because we're chatting to him, but we've actually got the guy who built the bad guys' cars in the last James Bond. All right, so there's an orange car racing around Rome, if any of the James Bond heads remember it, all right? And it turns out he's from Cork in Ireland, and he had to move back because his wife's family were sick or something like that. So he's the only Formula One engineer in Ireland, and we're like, do you want to get involved? So what we're looking at doing is building, do you know the way you get like these high-end sports cars? What we really want to do is, instead of it just being at the Geneva Motor Show, that you can have that car. And we'll basically either 3D print or laser cut the outside of the car. And our view is like, but actually we'll give it you in 2 colors. So we'll print you your car. You can have the Batmobile if you want to do it. And we'll print the car for you, do the whole lot, and you've got a 100% certified car. It's completely unique. We thought we could sell it for 100 grand. It'll probably be about £250,000.
Is another €2 for a spare?
Pardon?
Is another €2
it's
for
actually
spare?
really cheap to have a spare then, yeah. But that's an example of an outlandish weird one. The one we announced 2 weeks ago, which is really interesting, is we've taken over a ferry terminal in Dublin, and we're converting it into the largest co-working space in Ireland. That's not the Lucey Fund. I'm doing that one myself, another guy, and. It'll be like Ireland's Station F. Do you know Station? Have you heard of Station F in Paris? The huge thing they're doing in Paris. But this would be like a 1,000-person co-working space, but it's literally a ferry terminal. So all the meeting rooms will be like the bureau de change, and the interrogation rooms, I want to do like rubber gloves and stuff like that. So we're beginning to do more interesting things, not just B2B yet. Sorry.
Okay, we've got time for one more question.
I thought I
Mary?
Hi, you said you got 5,000 applications a year.
Yeah.
Around how many do you end up working with?
50. Well, 1%. Yeah. So we started 50 businesses last year. This year we'll be a little down on that. We were busy with the ferry terminal.
That was a short answer, so we can fit one more in.
Cool. Sorry.
Yeah, Mark?
Yeah, you provide services, right, in exchange
Yeah.
for equity in the company?
Yes.
How do you typically go about valuing these very early stage ideas?
A lot of the time, like we've kind of got pre-valuation thoughts that we do. So we started in Ireland, and in Ireland, the government would give you 50 grand for 10% of your business. So we figured that was the low end, right? And then depending on who you are and your expertise and what you're bringing to it, we might increase the valuation a bit there. UK valuations are a bit higher than that. American valuations are double that. So we kind of do it that way. But the way we have modelled it is very much similar to what we did with the charity day one. We've just kind of played with different maths and models on it and tried it loads of ways. And we come up with a value, and we work on creating a tech spec with people, so a real detail, what are we building here, and a shopping list, and people can basically use as much or as little of us as they want. So like what I always say to startups is, if you're going to get into a software business, for example, the odds are you're going to have a 3-person tech team. All right? So 3 people over 3 years is about £500,000 of wages. So the way we say to people is, think about your business needing at least £500,000 of tech, but you might only spend the first 100 grand with us. And then we'll help you set up your own. But some people might only spend 20 with us. Some people have spent 400 or 500 grand with us. It depends on the business and how far they want to go, and we do it based on this model whereby the more we do, the bigger the shareholding we take. And we kind of work it that way. So, but one of the things we do is we will insist that in some way the company comes in and part funds what they do with us. And the reason for that is when we paid 100% of the bill, people were taking too much of our services because it was like a crutch. So one of the things we need to figure out is, can you learn how to raise capital? Whether that's get a grant or get another investor, put some of your own money into it. Like our biggest risk with a founder, because we're so early, is that they might change their mind and just do something else. So we want to make sure we're not left owning 5% of an idea that the founder goes, nah, I'm not interested. Because if we go, well, can we have it? You go, yeah, give me 2 million quid. So we're looking for you to have a pain point, the business to have some kind of a pain point, and that everyone's tied into doing it, and that you're mentally thinking what is the cheapest, most efficient way to get this thing to the next stage of investment.
Perfect. So first of all, I'd like to thank Ian for coming over from Dublin and giving us your time and giving us so many little tidbits of information. So this is part of an overall number of events that are happening in November. We've got SG 200, which is the most amount of startup grind events that are happening worldwide. So you're part of a kind of bigger thing that there's a large amount of entrepreneurs that are being helped throughout November. So thank you to everyone else for coming along. I'd like to just, Dylan, if you've got thank you very much. So I'd just like to present this to you, and thank you very much for coming along. Thanks, Ian. Thank you.